In this video, we're going to talk about the different methods that we acquire knowledge. Some of these methods are important for the scientific method, and others we just kind of use in everyday life. So as we go through talking about the different methods of knowing and acquiring knowledge, I'm going to ask you some questions and see if you can kind of figure out what method of acquiring knowledge we're talking about. So why do some people believe that walking under a ladder is bad luck? What comes to mind? What is that? Why do people think that walking under a ladder is bad luck? Maybe superstition? Something they heard from somebody? Why do people believe that sitting too close to a TV will make you go blind? Has there been research on it? Or is it just something maybe your parents told you because they didn't want you to sit too close to the TV? So what kind of method of gathering knowledge is that? Is it just you're just kind of listening to somebody, you're believing what somebody has said? Information is just basically accepted to be true because it's always been believed. Maybe superstition supports it. And so that's called the method of tenacity. And so to define that, it's information is accepted as true because it's always been believed, or some sort of superstition supports it. The idea that just, by chance something occurred, and so that reinforces that idea, and every so often chance will continue to reinforce that idea and a superstition continues. So that's this method of tenacity. Obviously lots of limitations, potential inaccuracy. There's no real method for correcting any erroneous ideas because we just accept it at face value because someone else has told it to us. So how do you sometimes know that what you've made for dinner or what you've gone out and gotten for takeout is going to actually satisfy you? Sometimes we have a craving for something to eat. What makes you know that what you've gotten is going to satisfy that? Or what sometimes makes us feel unsafe in a certain situation? Maybe you're walking home or walking to the parking lot after a night class, and you just kind of get this feeling that something's not right. Or you meet somebody for the first time, and there's just something that doesn't sit right, that, you know that you don't think you want to get to know them better. Or maybe you meet someone for the first time, and without really talking to them, you feel like you're going to become really good friends. What helps us gather that type of knowledge? What would you call that? Might be a little bit farther off, but how about the method of intuition? So we're using intuition, kind of our gut instinct, based off a hunch. So information utilized is a hunch or a feeling that helps us to acquire knowledge. That's what this method of intuition is. Of course, there's limitations there also. It's hard to separate that hunch, that feeling, from accurate knowledge. It's hard to kind of know where that line is. How do you know that George Washington was the first president of the United States? Maybe you learned about it in school. Maybe a teacher told you. When we go over President's Day in February, the kids learn about different presidents. Maybe you read about it in a history book. We're talking about the American Revolution. So who wrote those history books? Historians, experts in the field? What would those people be called? Those historians, the teachers? What kind of figures are those? What kind of position do they hold? Authority? So that's the method of authority. So that's another way of gathering knowledge, is that we just trust different authority figures in our life, that people that know more than we know, people who are experts in a certain area, that what they tell us, we accept that's accurate. So we trust the authority of historians and history books. Information is gathered for an expert. So again, it's a good starting point. Sometimes it's the quickest way to obtain an answer, but it doesn't always provide accurate information. Often, we're kind of taking that expert statement as a fact, and how do we know they're really an expert? Some people have their own agenda, so it's important to kind of take that authority's information with a grain of salt. But George Washington was the first president of the United States. So how do you know you really have a stomach? Maybe when it gets full, you feel that it gets full, right? Or when you're hungry, you feel it growling. When you eat, something comes out the other end, and it comes out the other end differently. Maybe because you see in an anatomy book that humans have a stomach. You know that you're a human, so therefore you should have a stomach. All those could be potential answers. What makes you so sure the sun will rise tomorrow? Is it because it rose yesterday and the day before and the day before? So you assume that it will rise the next day, right? You're saying it rose the last 3, 4, 5 days, so it should rise tomorrow. So when you're using that to gather knowledge and make decisions and draw conclusions, what type of method are you using there? What are you doing? It's reasoning, right? It's a type of reasoning. And so we're going to call that the rational method. So that's where information is collected using reasoning and logic. And we have deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. And we'll talk more about those a little bit later on. But the idea is that, sometimes you're going from a general idea and you're gathering information, you narrow it down. Other times you start from a very specific observation and you come up with a general conclusion from that. So how do you know, if you look here, that you don't have a big hole in the back of your pants? I looked really hard for this picture, by the way. How do you know? When you sat down, did you hear a rip? Or when you got dressed this morning, did you look and you didn't see a hole in the back of your pants? If you're even wearing pants because you're listening to this at home online. Or say you're in school and you're walking down the hallway. You would hope that someone would tell you had a hole in the back of your pants, right? And I'll just tell you, my son Tyler ripped his pants twice in first grade. And so neither one of them were too tight. He just don't know how he did it. But the first time his teacher saw him, he knew he did it. He heard that rip and he was standing back along the wall. And the teacher's like, Tyler, come here. And he wouldn't come. So finally she went over him and she was really mad that he wasn't listening. And then she saw that he had the hole in the back of his pants, the rip. And so, of course, went up to the office. So you would think someone would tell you, you'd feel it, right? How do you know? Well, you can't see me, but if I was in class, how do you know what color should I be wearing? Or how do you know that you're wearing, say, a blue shirt? What are we using to answer these questions? Our senses, right? Whether we see something, we hear something, whether someone tells us something. So all of that's the empirical method, where information is gathered using observation and sensory experiences. So those are the methods of knowing and acquiring knowledge. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these, and you'll do an activity for the method of authority, the rational method, and the empirical method, because those are the three that we use in combination for the scientific method and to help us acquire that empirical evidence that's important in psychology and science.